Welcome back to another episode of the Freelancers Tea Break, and I've got a guest again this week, and I'm really excited about this one. This week I've got Sarah Browning, who I've known. How long have we known each other now? Like a decade or something?
Well, yeah, I don't know. It feels like a lovely long time.
So Sarah's a freelancer who's local to me, and she's I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. But we're going to talk today about passion projects and also where passion projects become something else, but also running them alongside a freelance business. And we're going to talk about a lot about kindness because that is Sarah's passion project. So Sarah, I'll pass over to you first. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your freelancing journey?
Sure. So yes, so my name's Sarah Browning. I am a communicator and kindness cheerleader, and I work with organisations who have a vision of a kinder world, in essence. And I'll talk, I'm sure, during our conversation how that description has developed over time. But my main freelance business, which I've been doing for about 11 years now, in a freelance capacity, is to work with these organisations to look at their communication and look at how they can achieve that vision of a kinder world through the use of effective communication, reaching the audiences they want to reach with the messages they want to get across and to achieve the outcomes that they want to achieve, essentially. I also, as of the start of this year, run a passion project initially, and again we'll talk this morning around how that is developing, but called Time for Kindness, which is a Instagram account and a website now to share stories of the everyday kindness in the world. And the reason that I do that is because I want to change the narrative that we have around kindness. You know, I think we hear an awful lot about all the bad stuff that goes on, all the negative stuff in the world. And I'm not denying that. I know there's some really horrible stuff that goes on. At the same time, I think we need to address that balance because we don't talk enough about all the kindness that does already exist, and redressing that narrative and the balance of that narrative is what I'm trying to do with Time for Kindness.
I can't remember who it was who did this quote, so I'm going to butcher it. But there was a quote that said something like, during hard times, look for the helpers. And this year and last year, more than anything, I think helpers or kindness is one of those key things to be looking at, really.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, that there are so many different levels, because actually one of the many reasons that I'm doing this is that I have a real fear that it becomes a bit of a negative self-fulfilling prophecy, that, you know, if we think everybody's out to get you, then that's what you see, and you only see the bad, and so on and so on, and it does become a downward spiral. And actually the opposite is true. The more we hear about kindness, the more we look for it, the more we see it. You know, I maintain there are very few people that if you saw somebody on the street drop their shopping bag, wouldn't rush over and help them pick it up. And we do all have that. We are all kind at heart. And so it's those everyday examples of kindness in particular that I'm trying to share through Time for Kindness, because I think also sometimes we do things that are kind almost without realizing it, actually, you know, and kindness doesn't have to be this huge grand gesture. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. And so there is a lot of that kindness going on around us. And I was saying to somebody the other day, it's a little bit like if I've decided to buy a red car, suddenly I see red cars everywhere. Now I'm you know, really kind of ramping up my kindness work. You know, it's not difficult to find stories about kindness. There are so many there, you know, out and about. I am always looking for people to send me more, but there are a lot.
I love seeing your Instagram stories because it's just a lovely little shot of positivity. My son, he's only 6 years old, but he came home and he's been telling me all about what they've been learning at school, which is about kindness chain reactions. Which is where if one thing happens to one person, they tend to pass on that kindness. It's a bit like sometimes when you hear about these Starbucks queues where they have to pay it forward things and people buy for the person behind them. But there is definitely a chain reaction of kindness. If one person's kind to another, they're more likely. It can change someone's day completely. It can change someone's mood, or you never know the impact of being kind that someone can have on someone.
Yeah, that is so true, isn't it? And actually, it isn't just about the impact it has on someone else. Actually, it makes you feel good too, quite frankly. If you know that you've smiled at somebody, or that you've helped them carry, a heavy bag, or whatever it might be, it does make you feel good too. And in fact, I'm increasingly hearing about, and it's so I have a big flip chart paper with loads of post-it notes on it for all the things to consider around time for kindness. And one of those post-it notes is that there is an increasing body of scientific research actually into the impact on you as an individual of being kind to others, as well as the impact on them. So I think one of the reasons I started Time for Kindness, and one of the sort of my website, I have a few kind of statements, as it were, key statements, and one of them is that I believe that kindness is powerful.
Yeah.
And it has perhaps been seen as kind of fluffy and weak, but actually it isn't. It's incredibly powerful because it unites us and connects us as human beings. And one of the reasons I again on the website I talk about how it is the website and the Instagram account is for people who believe in kindness, but also people who want to believe in kindness and perhaps feel a bit shy about it, or a bit reticent about it, or a little bit worried it makes them weak and silly. It doesn't. It really, really doesn't. And so I want to inspire people and uplift them, but also to a certain extent empower them to believe in the thing that they know really in their heart they want to believe in, and they're frightened, I suppose.
Yeah, I think people get worried about reactions sometimes, don't they? But funny enough, when you were saying about the weakness side of kindness, or people perceiving it to be weakness, and we were speaking just before we jumped on the call about kindness and feeling like it's only I'm trying to think of the word here. It's only genuine kindness if it only benefits the person you're being kind to. Whereas kindness, actually, like you say, it's a two-way thing. It makes you feel good as well. But I can see how people might see it as weak because you're helping someone else with no benefit to yourself. But that's not the reality of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me that there is something about we have, for whatever reason, as a society, we've kind of sold ourselves, or been sold this kind of polarized narrative about you're either one thing or the other. And actually that isn't, real life isn't like that. There are lots of kind of shades of grey in the middle, and bad people do good things too, and vice versa. Do you know what I mean? So the Time for Kindness stuff and Project Amplify Kindness, I'm conscious. I want to do my best to make sure it's not about coming across saying, hey, I'm Sarah, I'm kind, look at this. It isn't that. It is about highlighting those acts that kind of happen. And yeah, if it's good for you and it's good for the person that you're being kind to, or the people you're being kind to, then surely that's a win-win, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Twice as good.
Yeah.
Not half as good, it's twice as good. So there's as I say, many strands and many levels. It's
fascinating, the whole topic of kindness. So you started this at the start of the year.
Yeah.
So how did you find balancing it with being a freelancer as well?
Well, so it's balance, I think, is the right word. and as with any balance, sometimes it tips more one way than the other. But also, as I say, I've worked for a long time with not-for-profit organisations. Before I was freelance, I worked for Cancer Research UK. I was made redundant from there 11 years ago. And at the time, my daughter was very young, and I love working. I need to work, but I love working. I love my work. And I wanted to carry on doing it, but I couldn't find, at that time, there was even less kind of part-time work than there is now. And so I kind of thought, I'll dip my toe in the water of going it alone. I had no idea even really what that meant, to be honest with you. But because I'd worked in the charity sector, that's where my contacts were, and it was also where my heart lay, really, having worked in that world. So, and that's what I carried on doing. And I worked with not-for-profits, worked with charities, worked with universities, and so on. So I had always talked about working with organisations that made the world a better place. And then about this time last year, I think, like a lot of people, I was reviewing kind of that sort of philosophical, where am I going? Well, what's important to me? All that kind of stuff. And I was thinking, well, when I say better world, what do I mean? And I realised that I mean kinder world. And I realised just how important kindness actually was to me. And so that's where kind of Time for Kindness came from. And I'd always kind of, even right from that beginning, I developed it because I kind of went through that thought process of, okay, so if my big vision is a world with more kindness, what's my contribution to that? What skills do I have? How can I, what am I doing here? And that's where Time for Kindness came from. And I always thought of it as aligned with the work I was doing anyway. And I very much in my head kind of almost visualized it as kind of two parallel tracks, and thought that at some point, vague, undefined in the future, the two would perhaps come closer together. But I didn't really think about it in any more detail than that. And so I would say that I have, for the last 9 months then, because the time I've been through all the thought process and whatnot, into a new year, I was kind of playing with Time for Kindness, to be honest. I had never used Instagram before this. I'd never really seen a reason to. So I had to get my 13-year-old daughter to show me how to do it initially. And then the wonderful Alexis, who is also part of the freelancers community, I did her Instagram 101 to kind of give me those first few skills, and just kind of played with it, really. I found a lot of my peers were saying to me, oh, this is such a good idea, Sarah, I love this, but I'm not on Instagram. I don't see your stories, I'm not on Instagram. So that's where I thought, oh, well, I better have a website then. I better have another way for reaching people. And so I've kind of, in terms of that sort of balancing it with alongside my client work, which I've continued to do, and as is the way of things, sometimes I have more, sometimes I have less. And so sometimes I'm able to do a bit more with Time for Kindness, and sometimes it just sort of burbles along, as it were. But I think that kind of not putting too much pressure on myself about it has been a key and really important part of the kind of making Time for Kindness fun for me as well. Because I think if you're going to have this passion project, certainly for me personally, putting too much organisation and structure around it too soon would absolutely kill the passion. Yeah. It would stop in its tracks. And that's not good for me, but you know what, it's not really good for everybody else either. If this is something that is doing a positive thing in the world, is going to make some kind of change on whatever scale, then I've got, I need it to keep going. And so I think not feeling I had a vague sort of number of Instagram followers in my head that I wanted to get to. I vaguely have a schedule of I want to publish a couple of stories a week. I also host blogs as well on the site. So far they've all been guest blogs. I want one of those a month. So I had some kind of vague kind of ideas, but again, being kind to myself, I suppose. If I didn't hit that, or if I didn't, something slipped or whatever, we're all just trying to do the best we can, aren't we? With all sorts of it. I have a family, I have volunteer commitments, there's always something, isn't there? So I think that one of the many skills we have as freelancers is kind of learning to balance and juggle.
Interestingly, you touched on being kind to yourself as well. Do you find that the more you are kind to others or share kindness to others, the more kind you are to yourself?
That's an interesting question. I guess I probably am more conscious about being kind to myself, maybe. I think I've probably mostly always been fairly good at it, but not always. Like everybody, we have our more difficult times. But I think I'm probably more conscious and recognise that being kind to yourself is sort of part of the same thing, if you like, and that Again, I guess like we've already talked about, it's not a question of either or, being kind to others or to yourself, because I think, you know, if you get too much into always having to be kind to everybody else, if you're not careful, you run the risk of becoming a bit of a martyr.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful either. So it's been interesting. A couple of the blogs I've hosted have been around self-kindness. And in fact, the most recent one is because it was World Mental Health Day at the weekend, and somebody from the from the Mental Health Foundation wrote me a blog about self-kindness, and those ones have been really popular. I think there is definitely something that people are almost looking perhaps for permission to be kind to themselves, and there's one about self-compassion as a leader as well, which has been very, very popular, because I think, again, it's those narratives, isn't it? We have, you know, what I have started to notice is more and more narratives that I've sort of taken for granted.
Yeah.
And there is definitely, has traditionally been a narrative around leadership, and how, again, I suppose it's connected to what we were saying about weakness, that if you're kind as a leader, then you're a weak leader. And again, it's absolute nonsense.
Yeah, interesting. I follow someone called KC on Struggle Care, I think she is on Instagram. But she talks a lot about tasks and certain things being morally neutral. And that's really interesting when you dig into that, because there are so many things that we tie some positive moral or negative moral kind of compass to, and actually most of these things are morally neutral, but kindness is positively moral, really, isn't it?
It's funny, isn't it? And because even, you know, the language as well, I think, is really powerful. So, you know, even in talking about morals, for me, that word to me has a bit of a kind of religious association and connection to it, and I'm certainly not anti-religion in any way, shape or form, but you know, we're never starting from zero with any kind of communication. And I guess this is where I'm comms consultancy, I don't call it that actually, but that is what I'm doing. That kind of work kind of intersects with the kindness stuff as well, because I always talk to my clients about, you know, if you're putting together a communication strategy or a communications plan or whatever, you're never starting from zero. There is no such thing as no communication. You're not actively communicating yourself, then somebody will be filling that vacuum. And so, you know, whenever I try to be really conscious with my kindness stories of being as kind of clean with the language about it as I can, but at the same time I know that there is no way of being completely clean. I will always write it with some kind of bias of my own, or of the person who has sent it to me. And I think, you know, as with any bias, it's awareness is the first step, isn't it, really? And the language that we use can communicate all sorts of things that we perhaps didn't intend.
No. So, how can people get involved?
Well, yes, please. First of all, please get involved, because I think I sort of see myself as a sort of a storyteller, a cheerleader, a facilitator, and so on. But it isn't about, as I say, it's not about, hey, look at me, I'm kind. It's being able to tell other people's stories. So I guess, first of all, it'd be fantastic for people to tell me their stories, and get in touch via my website or my Instagram account. And you know, tell me the stories. They don't have to be big. You don't have to write them perfectly. Just kind of give me a few sort of facts, and we can go from there. I also, as I say, I host guest blogs as well. So if you're interested in writing a blog on a kindness topic, very much on the I start from there is kindness in the world already. Let's talk about what's there and build on that. I'm not interested in blogs that tell everybody off and say you must do this. So if you've got an idea for a blog, then please get in touch. I'm particularly interested in hosting blogs from people who perhaps don't normally get their voice heard, or you know, don't get that opportunity to do something like this. I'm really keen to hear from people like that. So again, get in touch. And the other thing is spread the word. Spread the word, tell other people. Like you say, I mean, it's fantastic that you find the Instagram stories uplifting. That's what everybody is saying to me. You know, they read them and it just makes them smile. You know, it doesn't have to be really deep and fundamental. I think for some people it is actually. People have also contacted me who have mental health issues and say, please keep doing this, because when I'm in a dark place, it is hard to see that the kindness is there, and I read your site and it reminds me. But even at a sort of slightly lighter, frothier level, you know, if you're looking for something to fill that last 10 minutes of the day of a Friday when you think, I really should stay at my desk, but I've had enough, you know, go and have a look, have a read, spread the word, and just keep being kind. Because everyone who's listening to this will be doing kind things, I'm sure, at regular points through their life. Just keep doing it.
And I'd love to add a little challenge to anyone listening to this, to look out for the kindness. Just be aware the next day or two of acts of kindness, and obviously tell Sarah about them if you can. But just for your own mental health, it is a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I promise you, once you start noticing them, you'll see more and more. And, you know, sometimes you can get into a terrible debate over kind of, well, what is kindness? What does kindness really mean? And at some level, it doesn't really matter. If you see something and you think that that's an example of kindness and it lifts your spirits, then, you know, that's all to the good.
Okay. So remind us where we can find you online.
So I'm on Instagram as at time_for_kindness. The website is timeforkindness.co.uk. And my comms consultancy at the moment is on a different website, which is browningyork.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on, Sarah. I hope you have a day full of kindness continued today. And we'll be back next week with another episode.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.